The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated silently in the darkness between stars. It was shaped like a giant wheel, spinning slowly to create artificial gravity for the thousands of beings living inside. Today the station buzzed with unusual activity. Ships from dozens of different worlds had arrived, bringing scholars and scientists from across the galaxy. Professor Veltherin walked through the crowded corridors toward the main lecture hall. He belonged to a species called the Quilxians, and he looked quite different from humans. His body was covered in smooth gray skin, and he had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on his face. His 3-fingered hands clutched a data pad containing his presentation. He had spent 2 years preparing for this lecture, and now the moment had finally arrived. The topic of his lecture was humanity. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, which was very recent by galactic standards. Most species took centuries to make any real impact on galactic affairs. But humans were different. In just 5 decades they had become impossible to ignore. They were everywhere, doing everything, and they behaved in ways that puzzled and sometimes frustrated the older species. Veltherin believed he had finally figured out why humans acted so strangely. He called it the human protagonism phenomenon. In simple terms, humans seemed to believe that they were the main characters in every situation they encountered. They treated every problem as if it was their personal responsibility to solve. They threw themselves into dangerous situations that other species would wisely avoid. They refused to accept defeat even when mathematics and logic clearly showed that defeat was inevitable. The lecture hall was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose up toward the ceiling. It could hold 3,000 beings comfortably. As Veltherin entered through the speaker's entrance, he saw that nearly every seat was filled. The Zenthri had come, with their bodies that looked like they were made of living crystal. Light passed through them in strange and beautiful ways. They were known as the most logical species in the galaxy, making decisions based purely on mathematics and probability. The Mrel were there too, clustered together in their usual groups of 7. They looked somewhat like Earth's reptiles, with scaled skin in shades of green and blue. The Mrel were cautious by nature. They believed in careful planning and never taking unnecessary risks. Their society had survived for 10,000 years by being careful and patient. In one section sat several Krovan warriors, their massive armored bodies barely fitting into the standard seats. The Krovan were the galaxy's premier military species. They respected strength and direct action. They found human military tactics both fascinating and frustrating because humans rarely followed proper military doctrine. There were dozens of other species present as well, each with their own reasons for wanting to understand humanity better. Some found humans amusing. Others found them dangerous. Many found them simply confusing. Veltherin noticed the small group of humans sitting in the back row. There were perhaps 20 of them, mostly young scholars and students attending the symposium as part of their studies. He had expected some humans to attend. In fact, he had hoped for it. Having humans present would make his lecture more impactful. One human in particular caught his attention. She was a woman with dark hair pulled back in a practical style, wearing the simple blue uniform that marked her as part of the cultural exchange program. According to his notes, her name was Emma Clark, and she held a doctorate in cultural anthropology. She was writing something on a data pad, and Veltherin could see that she was smiling slightly. Not the smile of someone who was happy, but the smile of someone who knew a secret. Sitting next to her was a man in a military uniform. His name was James Cooper, and he held the rank of lieutenant in the human space fleet. His arms were crossed, and he was watching the stage with an intense, focused expression. He looked like someone waiting for something to happen. Veltherin felt a small flutter of nervousness, which surprised him. He had given hundreds of lectures in his long career. He had spoken before the Galactic Council itself. But something about the way those humans sat there, calm and quiet and waiting, made him uneasy. It was as if they already knew what he was going to say and had already prepared their response. He shook off the feeling and made his way to the podium at the center of the stage. The lights in the hall dimmed automatically. A hush fell over the audience as 3,000 beings from dozens of worlds turned their attention toward him. Holographic displays flickered to life around the stage, ready to show his carefully prepared evidence. Professor Veltherin took a deep breath and began his lecture. He had no idea that within the next few hours, everything he thought he understood about humans would be tested in the most dramatic way possible. Professor Veltherin's voice filled the lecture hall as the holographic displays came to life around him. The first image showed a human spacecraft approaching a dying star. The star was collapsing in on itself, creating gravitational forces that would tear any ship apart. But the human ship flew closer and closer, ignoring every safety protocol that existed in the galaxy. This is Commander William Thompson, Veltherin explained, his translator converting his native clicks and whistles into Galactic Common. 2 years ago, a survey team became trapped near this collapsing star. Every calculation showed that rescue was impossible. The gravitational forces were too strong. Any rescue ship would be destroyed before reaching the survey team. The hologram showed the human ship diving into the corona of the dying star. The audience watched in silence as the ship's shields glowed white-hot from the intense heat and radiation. Somehow, impossibly, the ship reached the survey team, grabbed them with tractor beams, and escaped just before the star collapsed completely into a black hole. Commander Thompson and his crew survived, Veltherin continued. So did all 7 members of the survey team. When asked why he attempted such an obviously suicidal mission, Commander Thompson simply said, "They needed help, so we helped them." He saw no need for further explanation. The professor gestured with 3 of his limbs, and the hologram changed to show a different scene. This time it showed a human woman in an engineer's suit floating in the vacuum of space. Her helmet was off. She was literally holding her breath while her hands worked frantically on exposed power conduits. "This is Helen Morris," Veltherin said. She was aboard a colony transport when the life support system failed catastrophically. The ship had 400 passengers, mostly children being relocated to a new settlement. The system could not be repaired from inside the ship because the control systems were on the outer hull. Standard procedure is to evacuate everyone to escape pods and abandon the ship. The hologram showed Helen's face turning red, then purple as she worked. Her hands never stopped moving, connecting wires and rerouting power. Just when it seemed she must breathe or die, her hands slapped a final connection into place. She pushed herself back toward the airlock. The hologram froze on her face as she gasped her first breath of air back inside the ship. Helen Morris suffered permanent damage to her lungs from oxygen deprivation, Veltherin said quietly. But all 400 passengers survived. When asked why she did not follow evacuation protocols, she said, "The children were scared. I couldn't let them die scared." As if her personal feelings about the children's emotional state were more important than mathematical reality. The hologram shifted again, now showing a collection of human entertainment media. Movies, books, video games, and virtual reality experiences flickered past. In every single one, humans were the heroes. Humans saved the day. Humans overcame impossible odds. Humans defeated enemies that were stronger, smarter, and better equipped than they were. Now observe their cultural conditioning, Veltherin said, warming to his subject. From the earliest age, human children are told stories where they are the chosen ones. The special ones. The ones who will save the world. Look at this collection of children's stories. In every single one, an ordinary human discovers they have special powers or a special destiny. They are told again and again that they matter more than everyone else. A Zenthri in the audience raised one crystalline hand. Veltherin acknowledged them with a nod. The Zenthri's voice was like wind chimes as the translator rendered it into common speech. "We have studied human psychology extensively. They have a cognitive bias they call main character syndrome. They literally believe that reality revolves around their personal narrative." Veltherin gestured enthusiastically. "Precisely. Thank you, colleague. This is exactly my thesis. Humans suffer from a species-wide delusion of narrative importance." A Mrel representative stood up, moving in perfect synchronization with the 6 others in their group. "We have observed this behavior directly on our colony worlds. Humans constantly interfere with established systems. They see a process that has worked for centuries and immediately try to improve it. They cannot accept that some things are already optimized. They must make everything their personal project." Several species in the audience made sounds of agreement. The Krovan military observer spoke next, his voice deep and rumbling. "In joint military operations, human soldiers take unnecessary risks. They volunteer for dangerous missions even when there is no strategic benefit. They endanger themselves to save wounded comrades when the logical choice is to complete the mission objective. Their survival rates are terrible compared to other species." Veltherin pulled up statistical charts and graphs. The data was overwhelming. Humans had the highest rate of volunteering for dangerous missions. They had the highest rate of attempting impossible tasks. They had the highest rate of ignoring direct orders when they believed those orders were wrong. They also had the highest rate of succeeding at tasks that mathematical models predicted would fail. "This is my thesis," Veltherin declared, his 4 eyes sweeping across the audience. Humans believe themselves to be protagonists in a grand narrative. They treat every situation as if they are the main character in a story. They expect reality to conform to narrative structure, where courage and determination lead to victory. But the universe has no narrative structure. It simply exists. It follows physical laws, not story logic. He paused for effect. This delusion makes humans both remarkable and dangerous. They achieve impossible things, yes. But they also take foolish risks. They reject wisdom and experience in favor of their feelings. They cannot accept their place in the natural order of things. They must always be the hero, even when there is no villain to fight and no world to save. The audience murmured and buzzed with discussion. Many seemed convinced by Velthorin's arguments. The evidence was clear. Humans really did act like they believed themselves to be the most important beings in any situation. Then a voice called out from the back of the hall. It was calm and clear and amused. "You're absolutely right, Professor." Every eye in the lecture hall turned to see Emma Clark standing up. She was smiling now, not the secretive smile from before, but an open, genuine smile that somehow made Velthorin even more nervous than before. "We do think we're the main characters," Emma said, starting to walk down the aisle toward the stage. "Want to know why?" Emma Clark walked down the aisle with confident steps. She was not running, but she was not moving slowly either. Other species shifted in their seats as she passed. Walking down toward the speaker during a lecture was considered extremely rude in most galactic cultures. But Emma did not seem to care about that right now. Professor Velthorin's translator made a sound that indicated displeasure. "Dr. Clark, there will be time for questions after the presentation. Please return to your seat." "I'm not here to ask a question," Emma said, still walking. "I'm here to tell some stories." "You don't mind stories, do you, Professor? After all, your whole lecture is about how much humans love stories." She reached the stage and stepped up onto it without waiting for permission. Velthorin moved aside, unsure what else to do. The human woman stood at the podium and looked out at the audience of 3,000 beings from dozens of worlds. "3 years ago," Emma began, "there was a Mrel colony on the edge of the Outer Rim. Beautiful place. About 3,000 Mrel living there peacefully, building their lives. Then pirates attacked. Not just a few pirates but a whole fleet of them. 12 ships, heavily armed." She pulled up a holographic display showing the colony and the pirate fleet surrounding it. The Mrel defense computers ran the calculations. They always run calculations. The math said that if they fought back, 89% of the colony would die. So they did what made sense. They prepared to surrender. They would lose some people, but most would survive. That was the logical choice. Several Mrel in the audience nodded. One of them spoke up. "Yes, we remember this incident. It was a tragedy, but our people survived through wisdom and patience." Emma smiled. "That's one way to tell the story. Here's another way." Commander Thomas Bennett was nearby with his crew. 6 humans in a ship called the Defiant Storm. Not a military vessel, just a freight hauler with some defensive weapons. They heard the distress call from the Mrel colony. The hologram showed a small human ship approaching the pirate fleet. Thomas looked at the situation. 6 humans against 12 pirate ships. Any sane person would have jumped away and called for proper military help. Help that would arrive in about 6 hours, long after the colony was destroyed. She paused, letting that sink in. But Thomas didn't look at the mathematics. He looked at 3,000 people about to die and he said 5 words, "Not on my watch today." Then he attacked. The hologram showed the battle. It should have been a massacre. The human ship was outnumbered and outgunned. But it moved in ways that did not make sense. It took risks that no military academy would teach. It flew through debris fields that should have torn it apart. It used the gravity of nearby asteroids to slingshot into impossible angles of attack. Thomas and his crew fought for 47 minutes, Emma said quietly. They destroyed 4 pirate ships and damaged 3 others so badly that the remaining pirates retreated. Then Thomas landed at the Mrel colony, patched up his ship with duct tape and hope, and left before anyone could properly thank him. She looked directly at the Mrel in the audience. All 3,000 Mrel survived. Not 89%. 100%. Because 6 humans decided to be protagonists that day. Professor Velthorin interrupted. That is a single anecdote. One data point proves nothing scientifically. You're right, Emma agreed. Let me give you another data point. 2 years ago, there was a trade dispute between the Zenthari Economic Sphere and the Krovan Military Collective. A really bad dispute about mining rights in the Corward Nebula. Both sides were preparing for war. The calculations showed that war was 93% certain within 6 months. She changed the hologram to show 2 massive fleets facing each other across a contested border. Henry Walsh was a junior trade negotiator. Very junior. He was only at the negotiation table to take notes and bring people coffee. But after 2 weeks of talks, both sides were more angry than when they started. The senior negotiators gave up. They said war was inevitable now. Emma smiled. Henry didn't accept that. He refused to leave the negotiation room. For 40 straight hours he talked to both sides. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. He just kept talking, kept suggesting compromises, kept believing that there had to be a way to avoid war. The hologram showed a tired-looking young man sitting at a table, surrounded by alien diplomats who all looked annoyed with him. The Zenthri thought he was being illogical. The Krovan thought he was being weak. But Henry kept talking. And slowly, impossibly, he found solutions that no one else had seen. Little compromises that added up to something bigger. She looked around the lecture hall. There was no war. The Zenthri and Krovan signed a peace treaty that has held for 2 years now. Millions of lives were saved because one junior negotiator refused to accept that war was inevitable. Lieutenant James Cooper stood up from his seat in the back and walked down to join Emma on the stage. My great-grandmother lived on Earth during what we call the Water Wars, he said. Most of the planet was running out of fresh water. Billions of people were going to die. The predictions said human civilization would collapse within 20 years. He crossed his arms. But humans didn't accept that. We invented new desalination technologies. We built atmospheric water collectors. We changed how we farmed and how we lived. It took 50 years of hard work, but we saved ourselves. Because we refused to be extras in our own extinction. Emma nodded. You call it protagonism, Professor. We call it refusing to give up. Every species here evolved survival strategies. The Krovan have military strength. The Quilxians have social prediction models. The Zenthri have perfect logic. What do humans have? She spread her hands. We have stubbornness. We have hope. We have the absolute refusal to accept defeat even when mathematics says we should. You say we think we're the main characters in a story. You're right. We do. And you know why? Her voice grew stronger. Because on Earth, nothing else was coming to save us. No ancient aliens. No galactic federation. No magical solution. Just us. If we wanted to survive the ice ages and the plagues and the wars and the disasters, we had to save ourselves. We had to be the heroes because there were no other heroes available. James added, we're protagonists because we chose to be. Because the alternative was being victims. And humans really hate being victims. The lecture hall erupted. Dozens of species began talking at once, arguing with each other and with the humans on stage. The calm, orderly symposium had turned into something chaotic and unpredictable. And that was when the alarms began to sound. The alarms cut through the noise like a knife. Everyone in the lecture hall froze as red emergency lights began flashing throughout Nexus Prime. A computer voice spoke in every language simultaneously, creating a strange chorus of warnings that all said the same thing. Emergency. All personnel report to evacuation stations. This is not a drill. Void swarm detected on approach vector. Estimated time to contact, 3 hours. The lecture hall exploded into chaos. Beings from dozens of species jumped from their seats and rushed toward the exits. Some moved quickly, others moved in organized groups, but all of them moved with fear. Everyone in the galaxy knew about void swarms. They were massive collections of spaceborne creatures that ate metal and energy. They were rare, appearing only once or twice per century, but when they came, they destroyed everything in their path. Commander Zethus appeared on every screen in the station. He was a Zenthri, and his crystalline body reflected the red emergency lights in strange patterns. His voice was calm despite the crisis. All personnel begin evacuation procedures immediately. We have 47 ships currently docked with a total capacity of 12,000 passengers. Current station population is 15,000. Priority evacuation will be given to essential personnel and those with medical needs. Please proceed to your assigned evacuation points in an orderly manner. Emma grabbed James by the arm. 12,000 capacity for 15,000 people. That means 3,000 people are going to die. James was already moving toward the exit. Not if we can help it. Come on. They ran through the corridors of Nexus Prime. Other humans joined them as they went. Peter Grant, an engineer who had been attending the symposium. Lucy Foster, a medical officer. Robert Hayes, a physicist. More and more humans fell into step with them until there were nearly 20 running together through the panicking crowd. They burst into the command center without permission. Commander Zethus stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching void swarm and the evacuation progress. He turned his crystalline head toward them. Dr. Clark, you and your people must evacuate. We are implementing optimal survival protocols. Your protocols are going to kill 3,000 people, James said bluntly. Correct, Zethus replied without emotion. A 78% survival rate is the best outcome given our current resources. The mathematics are clear. We cannot save everyone, so we must save as many as possible. Emma pushed past several Zenthari officers to look at the tactical displays. The void swarm showed as a massive red cloud on the sensors, moving toward them at incredible speed. Behind her, Professor Veltherin had followed them into the command center. His 4 eyes were wide with concern. This is exactly what I was talking about, Veltherin said. You cannot make yourselves the protagonists of this crisis. Accept reality. Accept that some will die so that others may live. Emma ignored him. She was studying the displays, her mind racing. Peter Grant pushed his way to a console and his fingers began flying across the controls. Wait. The station has industrial electromagnetic generators in the research labs. Big ones for particle experiments. What are you thinking? James asked. The void swarm creatures navigate using electromagnetic fields, Peter said, pulling up schematics of the station's power systems. If we could generate a massive pulse, tune it to the right frequency, we might be able to disrupt their cohesion. Make them scatter or at least slow them down. Lucy leaned over his shoulder, reading the data. That would require overloading the station's main power core. We'd have to reconfigure the entire power grid. And it would take at least 2 hours, Robert added, running calculations on another console. That's 2 hours we should be spending on evacuation. Commander Zethus's voice was sharp. What you are suggesting is extremely dangerous. What is the probability of success? Peter hesitated. Based on theoretical models, about 23%. 23%, Zethus repeated. And if it fails, the delay will reduce our evacuation time critically. Survival rates would drop to approximately 31%. You are asking me to risk everyone's lives for a less than 1 in 4 chance of success. Yes, Emma said simply. That's exactly what we're asking. Veltherin stepped forward. This is madness. You cannot gamble with 15,000 lives based on hope and a 23% chance. The logical choice is clear. Evacuate as many as possible with certainty rather than risk everyone on a desperate gamble. James turned to face the professor. That's the difference between us, Professor. You see 78% survival as acceptable. We see 3,000 deaths as unacceptable. You're willing to be logical. We're willing to be desperate. I cannot authorize this plan, Commander Zethus said firmly. It violates every safety protocol. It goes against all rational decision-making. I will not gamble with thousands of lives. Then don't authorize it, Peter said, his hands already working on the console. Court-martial us later. Fire us. Throw us in prison. We don't care. Right now we have work to do. Emma looked at the other humans. We need to split up. Peter, take a team to the engineering sections and start reconfiguring the power grid. Lucy, prepare medical bays for possible casualties. Robert, work with the Quilxian scientists on calculating the exact pulse frequency we need. James and I will coordinate evacuation procedures in case this doesn't work. The humans began moving to their assigned tasks. Then something unexpected happened. A massive Krovan warrior stood up from where he had been monitoring security systems. I will assist with power routing. Your plan requires heavy lifting and my strength will be useful. A Quilxian scientist tentatively raised 2 of her appendages. I can help model the pulse sequences. Our predictive algorithms are more advanced than human computers. One group of 7 Realm moved together toward the docking bays. We will organize evacuation procedures with maximum efficiency. If your plan fails, we can minimize the chaos. More and more non-humans began volunteering. Species that had spent millions of years being logical and careful were suddenly choosing to be reckless and hopeful. They were choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story could have a better ending. Professor Veltherin stood in the middle of the command center, watching his entire thesis come to life before his eyes. The human protagonism was spreading like a virus, infecting every species it touched. They were all becoming protagonists now, all believing that their actions could change the inevitable outcome. Commander Zethus watched the chaos for a long moment. Then he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Fine. We attempt this insane plan. All personnel, new orders. We are going to try to repel the void swarm. Humans will coordinate the technical operations. All other species will prepare evacuation as backup protocol. We have 2 hours and 47 minutes. Let us see if hope can triumph over mathematics. The command center erupted into organized chaos as thousands of beings across dozens of species worked together on an impossible task. The next 2 hours were like nothing Nexus Prime had ever experienced. Throughout the massive station, beings from dozens of worlds worked together in ways that should not have been possible. Peter Grant and his engineering team tore apart expensive research equipment worth millions of credits and rebuilt it into something no engineer had ever designed before. Krovan warriors used their incredible strength to move heavy power conduits that normally required machines to lift. In the science labs, Emma worked alongside Quilxian scientists who normally spent years carefully analyzing data before making any decisions. Now they were making calculations in minutes, adjusting frequencies and power levels based on guesses and intuition as much as mathematics. Robert Hayes argued with a Zen3 physicist about pulse timing, both of them shouting numbers at each other while their hands flew across holographic displays. Lucy Foster prepared the medical bays while simultaneously helping organize the backup evacuation plan. The Mrel worked with her, their usual slow and careful methods replaced by quick efficiency. They had decided that if they were going to be protagonists, they would be the best protagonists they could be. James Cooper stood in the command center coordinating everything. Ships were being prepared for emergency evacuation. Escape pods were being checked and rechecked. If the plan failed, they would have less than an hour to get everyone off the station. Every second would count. Commander Zethus monitored the approaching void swarm on the tactical displays. The massive cloud of creatures was getting closer. He could see them now on the external cameras, a churning mass of living things that glowed with a sickly green light. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. With 17 minutes remaining until the swarm arrived, Peter's voice came over the communications system. We're ready. All power conduits are connected. All generators are synchronized. We can fire whenever you give the order, Commander. Zethus looked around the command center. Every screen showed different parts of the station where beings were working frantically. He saw humans and Krovan and Mrel and Zen3 and Quilxians all working together. He saw his own people, the logical Zen3 who never took risks, volunteering to stay at their posts even though it meant they might die. All personnel brace for electromagnetic pulse, Zethus announced. His crystalline hands moved across the controls. Firing in 3 seconds. 2. 1. He pressed the activation button. Nexus Prime shuddered like a living thing. Every light in the station flickered and dimmed. The power core, pushed far beyond its design limits, screamed with energy. The electromagnetic pulse erupted outward from the station in an invisible wave that traveled at the speed of light. In the command center, everyone waited. The sensors showed the pulse wave spreading outward, hitting the void swarm like a tsunami hitting a beach. For a moment, the swarm's movement stuttered. The creatures scattered and reformed, their organized movement disrupted. Then the swarm kept coming. It failed, Professor Veltherin said quietly. His 4 eyes were sad. Begin evacuation immediately. We have 73 minutes remaining. The humans stood frozen for only a heartbeat. Then they moved. Emma was already running toward the docking bays. James was coordinating ship assignments. Lucy was directing people toward the nearest vessels. Every human switched instantly from the failed plan to the backup evacuation. But they were not moving with defeat. They were moving with fierce determination. And every other species followed their example. The evacuation that should have been slow and orderly became something else entirely. Ship captains threw out their safety regulations and packed in more passengers than their vessels were designed to hold. Engineers jury-rigged life support systems on the fly to handle the overload. The Mrel, who normally moved in careful synchronized groups, ran through corridors directing people to ships with unprecedented speed. The Zen3 ignored their precious protocols and made decisions based on intuition. The Krovan shared their military rations to make sure everyone had supplies. The Quilxians used their social models not to predict behavior but to organize the chaos into something that almost worked. In the command center, Zethus stared at his sensors in disbelief. Wait. The swarm is moving slower. Robert Hayes looked up from his calculations. What? The pulse did not repel them but it damaged their cohesion, Zethus said, his crystalline fingers dancing across the controls. They are moving at approximately 60% of their previous speed. The pulse bought us time. James grabbed the communication controls. All ships, you have additional time. Repeat, the swarm has been slowed. We can get everyone out. What happened next would be talked about in galactic history for generations. 15,000 beings from dozens of species evacuated Nexus Prime in 73 minutes. Not the 12,000 that mathematics said was possible. Not the predicted 78% survival rate. Everyone. All 15,000. The last ship, a small MREL transport packed far beyond safe capacity, undocked from Nexus Prime with 17 minutes to spare. James Cooper was on that ship, making sure he was the last to leave. As the ship pulled away, he watched through the viewport as the void swarm engulfed the station. Nexus Prime, which had stood for 200 years as a symbol of galactic cooperation and learning, was torn apart in minutes. The creatures swarmed over it like insects, consuming the metal and energy until nothing remained but scattered debris. The 15,000 survivors watched in silence from their crowded ships. Then someone started cheering. It spread from ship to ship, a sound of joy and relief and triumph that crossed every language barrier. Professor Veltherin found Emma Clark in the packed cargo hold of the evacuation vessel called Distant Hope. They were surrounded by hundreds of beings pressed together, sharing air and space and the simple fact of being alive. "Your protagonism nearly killed us all," Veltherin said. Emma looked at him with tired eyes. "But it didn't. And everyone lived. Tell me honestly, Professor. Would you prefer 78% survival with certainty, or 100% survival with risk?" Veltherin was quiet. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which was a sign of deep thought among his people. "You assume the universe has narrative structure. You assume that bold action will be rewarded. That is not scientific thinking." "No," Emma agreed. "We assume that if there's going to be a story worth telling, someone has to be brave enough to create it. The universe doesn't care about stories, Professor. But we do. And sometimes that's enough." James squeezed through the crowd to join them. "Besides, someone has to do something. Might as well be us." Veltherin looked around at the crowded ship, at the 15,000 beings who should not have survived, at the mixed species working together and celebrating together. "I need to completely rewrite my lecture," he said slowly. "Oh?" Emma asked. "Yes. I thought human protagonism was a delusion, a dangerous flaw in your species' psychology. But I was wrong. It is not a delusion. It is a choice." He paused, finding the right words. "The choice to act as if your actions matter. To believe that the story can have a better ending. To refuse to accept that anyone should be just a supporting character in their own life." Lucy Foster, who had been listening nearby, smiled. "Now you're getting it, Professor." As the evacuation fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the void swarm and the ruins of Nexus Prime far behind, something remarkable began to happen. The story of what happened spread from ship to ship and eventually to every corner of the galaxy. Other species began to ask themselves questions they had never asked before. What if we could be protagonists too? What if hope was not illogical but powerful? What if the universe did not have to follow a story, but we could choose to create stories anyway? Humanity's gift to the galaxy was not their technology. It was not their strength or their intelligence. It was their stubborn, foolish, beautiful refusal to give up. It was their belief that everyone deserved to be the hero of their own story. And slowly, across 1,000 worlds, other species began to believe it too.